Hello and welcome to the Crystal Podcast on iCode Media. Today we're having episode number 7 of the CSW F3 podcast with my good friend, Bryan Johnson. We call him, well, I'll let you wait to know what we call him toward the end of the podcast. So please enjoy our conversation. As always, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, share it with your friends, and support those who support us. So Bryan, I don't ever know if I've called you that name before, but for the majority of this podcast, I'll call you Bryan. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about primarily was a little bit on aviation meteorology, but I kind of want to save that conversation more toward the end, because I think what my listeners are generally interested in is, kind of things that they can learn from a business standpoint. So first of all, tell my audience who you are, what you do, and how you found your way to F3.
Yeah, sure. My name is Bryan Johnson. I grew up in New Hampshire and really got into skiing when I was a teenager. And my buddies and I were trying to think of cool jobs to do that would get us a good job at a ski resort. And in our infinite wisdom at 17, we thought those guys need to know when it's going to snow. So we thought we'd become meteorologists. That's not really the way we probably should have done it. But right after high school, I joined the Air Force, United States Air Force, and got into the weather job. It's a really kind of specific job for the Air Force, and the Air Force even does weather for the Army. So there's a whole bunch of places that we can go all over the globe. And I was lucky enough that after you finish basic training, you go to a school, and it's a 6-month training school, and it's basically Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 hours a day of just straight up learning, uh, atmospheric dynamics, fluid dynamics, understanding cloud types, different types of phenomena, understanding how that then will impact missions, how that impacts our aircraft and our airframe, and ultimately how it impacts our airmen that are across the United States Air Force and across the globe, trying to defend the country, because we have to keep them safe. So a 6 months training school, and I was lucky enough that I got to go up to Alaska. Was my first assignment right in Anchorage. And when you're there, it was basically at the time was another like 3 to 4 months of training before you're really ready to go onto the operations floor. Just learning how weather patterns will typically set up in our region. At the time, we called those regimes. Regime-based forecasting, at this point is 20 plus years old, and it's not used as often anymore. But when I was first starting to get into forecasting, that's what we used all the time. And so I spent some time in Alaska, had a great time, eventually matriculated my way across the country over to Korea, down to Louisiana, into Iraq, and lo and behold, ended up here eventually. And then when I got here, it's kind of a cool deal. Weather headquarters for the Air Force is at Offutt Air Force Base. And I've been able to stay here for quite a few years. At first, I wasn't, super excited about the area because I'm from New England, where we have the ocean and the mountains, and then I spent most of my life in the Pacific Northwest, where there's lots of mountains. But about 2.5 years ago, I was getting promoted to a new rank, and I was kind of also getting close to turning 40. It was just about a few months away from my 40th birthday. And one of my good buddies, Short Sail, or Steve Menino, he was like, "Hey, you should come out to this thing," and he'd mentioned it before. And at my promotion party, he was actually like doing it on Monday, and so I was like, let's just do this thing. And ended up coming to F3, and it just worked out really well for timing. It was in early November, and then there was like a Veterans Day ruck going on, I think the next weekend that after I started, and I was like, well, that's really cool. They're doing something for Veterans Day. I'll go do that. And if you've ever been on a ruck with a bunch of guys in F3, you really start connecting right off the bat and having really great conversations. And I just fell in love with the group, and the military's got a bunch of great connections, but sometimes, especially in today's military, it seems like those connections aren't exactly what they used to be or what they're made up to be. And I found a lot of really great deep friendships and connections through the community into F3, and I'm just really grateful for it. So that's kind of how I got to F3 and to Omaha in a kind of roundabout way, and a little bit about me.
So I didn't know that short sale brought you in, but it must have been almost the exact same time that I came into F3. And I'll tell you, like, you probably don't know this, maybe you do, but you have a significant impact on a lot of people, and in particular, you've had a big impact on me, just in your ability to connect with people that you don't have fundamental, maybe kind of theological or philosophical agreements with. And you and I are, we've talked about this a bit, and I'll bring it up if you're comfortable with it. If you're not, I guess I'll delete it out of the episode. But just our differences in our approach to our belief in a higher being, and I found great comfort in your ability to humanize people in ways that I think is exceptional. And and so with that, I think you have some good insight into some people that I have, had very close personal relationships with that has been helpful for me to understand. What do you think? And I want to kind of parlay that introduction to what do you think the challenge that we have currently in in the United States with men that applies to people who have maybe a faith in a higher being like myself. And my reaction oftentimes, and I'll lay this out here, Doppler, because it sort of makes me think that I have to be wrong because of my understanding of you and your belief system, is that I think a fundamental challenge that we have in the country is a movement away from faith in a higher being. And I think when we place our faith in like what's going to make us happy here on earth and these temporary happinesses, we look to ourselves and we're not going to be happy within ourselves. And so but then I look at you and I'm thinking, well, Doppler, he seems to be sort of a contradiction to my philosophical and theological understanding. And so how is that the case? Well, maybe it's because Bryan, I already gave away your name, but maybe because Bryan does look outside of himself. Maybe it's not necessarily to a higher being, but maybe it's outside of himself. So I'll let you take it from there. And maybe I've shared too much. I'm sorry if I have.
No. I love this subject. I think it's probably a really important one, maybe one of the most important ones for us to talk about. You're exactly right. And I mentioned that Short Sale invited me out in the summer, and I said no. And the honest reason was because he said it was called Fitness, Fellowship, and Faith, and that scared me. Um, and I'll go into that because I'm happy to talk about it. I think it's understanding my journey maybe helps people understand wherever they're at in their journey. And so I was really afraid of the Christian faith, or anybody who is deeply religious. And I'll use the word religious instead of spiritual because that's at least how I used to maybe view things. Um, so I grew up, and my dad was Protestant, and we would go to church occasionally, but it wasn't really a huge part of our lives. Kind of your standard halfway in, one foot in the door with the Christmas and Easter and some occasional services on Sunday here and there. But it wasn't something that was, at least growing up, something that was really super present in my life. Um, and then after my parents got divorced when I was about 11, my mom, I think, in her search for community, uh, returned to the church, and she found an evangelical church in the town that we grew up in. And my dad married, at being a Protestant, of course, married a Catholic for his second wife. So that was always fun. But yeah, I got kind of a good variety of what Christianity looks like. And I don't know how long it's supposed to be, but I'll go deep into it if that's okay. We can cut it off if we have to. I always thought it was interesting to see Christianity through three different lenses within. Yeah, I thought it was different for me to see Christianity through three completely different lenses, basically under one or two roofs, right? The Catholic had all these deep rooted traditions that I didn't fully understand, but I thought were very interesting to me. I kind of appreciated the tradition for what it was. I thought it was kind of interesting to like hold on to those things. But I also personally didn't like the rigidity of it. Um, I grew up in a fairly socially liberal part of the country, so like homosexuality was something that was I was aware of, especially among some of my friends people that I cared about and loved, or even within my own family. And so when I would hear things that were it would call homosexuality a sin or something along those lines, I would get really confused and angry a lot of times. So like, how could you say this about somebody that I love? It didn't make sense to me. That didn't register. And since I wasn't super deeply rooted in faith, I think that is why I was able to go there quickly. And then my dad was a Protestant, like I said, so that was a little bit different. Kind of, I don't know, in my limited understanding of the Protestant religion and those services, kind of your just bread and butter Christianity, nothing too fancy or flavorful, but just some good old going to church and sitting down and hearing some sermons and then grabbing some coffee afterwards. And then my mom's church is what really for me, like I was really pushed away from Christianity and religion quite a bit. And my sister and my mom was dealing with borderline personality disorder her whole life, and she was really unstable. And so she would be really hungry for deep relationships. And I think sometimes it's easy to find that in a church, and I think that's what makes churches, whatever the faith may be, so great, is because it provides a community, whether it's a synagogue, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Hindu, whether it's what a Christian, whatever it is. I think what people love about their faith a lot of times is being in a room or community with a group of people that at least share some values and care about the people who are in that room around them. And my mom was hungry for that, and she found it in her church. Um, but that church, at the same time, my sister and I, like I said, were really close, just because I think we had to be to keep each other safe while growing up with my mom. It was not always the safest environment for us. Um, so my sister and I leaned on each other really hard, and my sister in the mid to late '90s, like so many other kids, turned to like the Wiccan and like pagan religions, and that was something that she kind of got really into and interested in. And I remember going to church one day and sitting there, and the sermon was about how pagans were all going to burn in hell. Um, and I looked at my mom, I looked at my sister, and I was like, why the hell are we here? My sister was just beautiful, incredible, strong, incredible person in my life. And to sit in a church and be told by some leader of a church that she was going to burn in hell uh, was something that I firmly rejected and reject to this day. And I will never accept that. And because then I will always accept my sister, and I love her unconditionally. And so that was kind of the moment where I was like, screw this, like religion is dumb. I don't want anything to do with it. And I just turned away from it. And then that became further solidified when I was 21. My mom was still going to that same church, was talking about going to church all the time and how it was a great church. But my mom ultimately killed herself when I was 21. And I remember walking into the house. And when I got home, I was in Keesler Air Force Base as TDY for a school, and my mom had called me, and she was like, and my mom had tried to kill herself numerous times. It was something that I was used to, unfortunately. And when she and I had our last phone call together, I was like, "Hey, are you thinking about hurting yourself?" And she said, "Yeah, I am." And I was like, "Okay, well, don't forget, like, you have your church, you have your sisters, you have your friends." I was like, "Just reach out to them and lean on them. Like, I'll be home next week. I'm gonna fly home and see you. Your birthday's coming up, and I'll come home the next weekend." And so when she ended up killing herself before I got home, when I got home, she had the Bible laid out, and I don't even remember what part it was at, but she had this Bible laid out, and I was just so mad. I was just so mad at how Christianity had failed her and how her church and this community had just failed her. And I was just so angry. And I took some of that young male misguided anger and just put it towards the church and said, you know what? They didn't serve her and take care of her. And how the hell can you say that you're some great community and organization if you can't keep one of your congregation members alive? And how can this book be so great if it's open and my mom's sitting here or hanging here by the rafters? It's like, how can that happen? Um, this is not anything that anybody needs is where I was at, and I was there for a long time. So eventually I was back in Alaska, and I was with my friend one day, Ginger. She's just a girl I graduated from high school with. She's a great girl, and she was deeply religious. And we were on a 5-day float trip through the middle of Alaska, and we were great friends, roommates. We were floating on this trip, and as you are when you're on a boat for 12 hours a day, we had some really deep conversations. And I was like, "Hey, Ginge, like, how is it that you are so deeply religious?" Because it was really important to her. She went to church every Sunday. It was very important to her. And she's like, "Well, that's how I grew up. I just believe this above everything else. And I truly believe it." And I was like, "Do you believe that you're going to heaven if you believe in Jesus?" And she's like, "I do." And I was like, "Well, what does that mean for me?" I was like, "You know that I don't." And she like looked at me. She like almost like she started like crying. And she's like, "Bryan, like, I just wish that you believed in Jesus the way that I do, because like I want you to go to heaven with me. And like that's why I talk to you about it. I just love you so much." And I think that was the first time. I was probably in my early 20s, mid 20s. I think that was the first time that I really understood it, what it means to be faithful and what it means to go on a mission as a Christian, or whatever faith it is, and try to spread that message. It was the first time that I understood, because I knew Ginger so well and she was such a beautiful person, that she was coming from this very true place of love. And it was the first time that I'd seen that attached to religion in a really, really, really long time. And I think I needed that. And maybe not for me to return to Christianity, but to understand that I had been so angry at the Christian faith as a church, maybe not as a person, but as a church, or this figure I had in my head, as a group of people that sat there and judged. They judged, members of my family who were homosexuals. They judged my sister who said she was a pagan in high school. They couldn't keep people safe to me that I loved, like my mom. And I just was so angry and just felt like they were sitting there judging from a position where nobody should be judging. And when the book itself, the Bible says, judge not lest you be judged, from my limited understanding of the Bible. And for the first time, Ginger kind of blew my mind, and kind of cracked me out of this defensive shell that I had lived in for so long, and made me realize that she loves me. And the reason she would ever ask me to turn towards her faith is not judgment, but love. And I've really done my best to just embrace that and love that. And that's why I love talking to you or Plague, and just hearing your messages of love and acceptance, and your also willingness to listen to me and be coming from a non-judgmental place. And it took me a long time, and I'm sure I'm still not perfect at it. But I think seeing you guys and Ginger started it all for me, and then F3 has just made it even more true, is just really understanding that true Christians, who are good Christians, just like there's good people and bad people all over the place, good Christians just really want to love you and keep you safe in the afterlife as well as the current life. And getting a better and better understanding of that every day makes it easier for me to ask questions, be interested, want to know about their faith, even if it's not mine. And there you go. There's like a 20-minute answer, I think, on that one.
No, I think that's really helpful. I think that, you know, because I can't tell you that. So I have been completely turned off by Christians before. I've had the same experience. You walk out of mass, or you drive by, a non-denominational church, or any church, synagogue, whatever, and you see people peeling out of the parking lot, or I mean, you see that stuff. And I think one of the things that was really helpful for me, and I'm not sure when I learned it, but it allows you to be able to understand the differences between human. And I'm not saying this to try to convert you or any of those sorts of things. I'm just saying this is my observation, is what yours is that there is a difference between a faith and a human. And so even I probably will fall and fail in your eyes at some point. And I think we have enough. At some point we have enough grace to be able to say, like, yeah, that's just the human nature, and yeah, hopefully we're not going to slip too far, and hopefully we're not going to make big mistakes. But I'm certainly not perfect. I know that you know that, and I know that but for me to understand that's not necessarily a reflection on a foundational faith system and religion, because humans fail in that, I think has been very helpful for me to maintain my faith. When you see other things, you're like, how could this possibly happen? This is disgusting. You look at scandals within the church, and scandals even within the church that is close to that is our parish, where you can easily see how you'd be justified in walking away from a parish and a faith, and yet being able to separate human behaviors from what occurs in a faith has been helpful, and I think that's kind of your point as well, to be able to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm going to just for one quick second say that, just to go back to what you said about, like, I'm sure at some point that you said that you'll think that you'll fail at some point, and I'll judge you. And I think that was one of the biggest revelations I had through my anger or frustration or dissatisfaction with religion, was that I was so angry at these organizations for judging me or other people. And what I really was doing was I was also just being a huge hypocrite and I was judging them without knowing them. And and uh and so when you say that I'm going to sit there and judge you, I sure as heck hope I don't. I'm not saying I won't, but I said I sure as heck hope I've grown enough to realize that me judging is just being hypocritical and not loving.
But at the same time, I do think that if I would rely on you as a friend, that if I had a behavior that was not in line with who I was or who I want to be, that you would be able to cast judgment and help bring me back in line. So I think there is this kind of this kind of line that we need to walk, where we do need, I need judgment. I need judgment and correcting from people, and that's one of the things I value about F3 and value about the fellowship.
Yeah, no, for sure. You're right on right there. I just want to make sure I guess you did a good job painting the picture of judgment in a more positive light. I just want to make sure I do it the right way, because I think there you go. We could judge each other on how we're judging each other, right? And for your question of what keeps me coming, yeah, right. What keeps me coming back to F3? Um, gosh, I was 40 pounds heavier than I am right now when I joined F3, and that fitness journey was really good. I think everybody kind of gets attached to that drug sometimes, or that of their body feeling better, and maybe having a t-shirt fit a little bit less tightly, or those jeans fitting better. I think that's a powerful drug. Looking in the mirror and seeing your body improve and moving faster. So that was definitely the key early on for me. And I mean, I'm sure you've heard it 100 times, if not more, that it's really just the relationships that I've built. The other morning, we were sitting at the berm and talking about best friends on National Best Friends Day when Vandalay was queuing, and it was just interesting because, like, somebody had asked me recently who my best friend was, and I was like, man, I don't even know. Like, I've got so many friends, and it sounds kind of almost feels arrogant to say that. But that's kind of what F3 provides for you. Um, because you know this, like, you can end up running or partnering up with a guy that, I mean, well enough, but like maybe you don't really know him that well. You certainly probably don't know his first name, right? So you run next to a guy, and all of a sudden you're having, like, yeah, this really deep conversation. And F3 is like fellowship, but it really is this incredibly safe place to admit your flaws, to say that you're feeling weak, to say that you're feeling strong, to say that you're feeling like you saw somebody else who did something that was really incredible. And it's just unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It's just such a great place to feel seen and heard, but also to see and hear other men who are at similar points in their lives, or maybe a more advanced point in their life, or guys coming up, and you just get a chance to either reach up to a guy and ask for help and get some mentorship, reach down to a guy and lift him up and explain to him like, hey man, I've been through that and it's tough, but like here's some things that I did that might be helpful for you. And if that's not what you want, just know that you can text me if you have a problem and want to talk about it. It's just such a great and beautiful thing. And I'm just so happy to be even a tiny part of it. Let alone I've been lucky enough to become a bigger part of it. I got to be a site Q, which was I thought the coolest thing ever. Getting to like really know that site, know the guys who came to that site, about some incredible relationships through there. And now, as F3 keeps getting bigger and bigger, like now I get to help with second F stuff, which is something that's really near and dear to my heart. Is getting together with the guys. I get to kind of help lead some second F efforts in the West sector, and I'm just really happy to be part of that and to help guys connect. Because I don't know, I feel like that sometimes is something that I'm halfway decent at. So it's kind of nice to use a set of skills that helps me be decent at it. I know that there's certain jobs in helping out with F3 and leadership that I probably wouldn't be as good at, but if you want me to throw together a happy hour or find ways for guys to have fun together, I can usually figure that one out. So I'm happy to help there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's cool. I think that allows for people to kind of find their own niche. Like, certainly you're way better at a lot of those things than I would be. And there's probably strong points. And that's the beauty of the network, is that you get to share all those strong points. You brought up one really interesting kind of phrase that I have this immediate aversion to, or maybe even repulsion to, but it's so true, is this safe space. And you know, the safe spaces that we hear about often in media seem to me to I think it shows that you do need a safe space, but this space of safety needs to be, it can't be manufactured in any artificial sense. The beauty of the safe space within F3 is that it's not about just having all of your being affirmed all the time, or having everybody agree with you. It has nothing. It's actually completely contrary to that. It's like when I want to vent about something, or even be called out on something, I'm going to bring it to these guys. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I need to be, or maybe I need to have some course correction, but I'm unsure about it. It's this space of safety where you can know, all right, I can bring this to that group, and I'm going to have an individual specifically, and I'm going to have the trust of that person. And I know that I can have that person correct me and give me perspective that I need to hear, whether it's something I know I need to hear, or something I don't know I need to hear. It's going to be valuable. And I think that's what you mean about the safe space, as opposed to being affirmed all the time. It's safety in that I can trust that the people that are there have my best interest in mind, and will, in most cases, give me an honest opinion about the situation I find myself in, or the thing I'm struggling with. And I think that's what people need, that kind of safety.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I hear what you're saying with the safe space where everybody's affirmed and everybody's perfect and nobody makes mistakes. But I think you're right? Like for me, when I say safe space, it's a place where I can go and show my flaws, or maybe try something new. And if I get course corrected, even if it's aggressively, I trust that everybody in that circle that's helping me with that course correction is coming from a place of love, um, or like a very healthy, good place. Nobody's out there trying to be like, oh, here's my chance to get one over on Doppler. It's a situation where they're coming to me and trying to help build me up and lift me up in a healthy way. I think that's what I mean when I say safe space, for sure. But yeah, I hear you with the participation trophies and all that other stuff. I can rub some people the wrong way, and I get that too.
So listen, Doppler, Bryan, listen, I wanted to have you on and talk about aviation meteorology, but I think that needs to be continued, because I want to be respectful of your time and your time with your kids and time with your family that you've got set aside for today. So listen, let's finish this out like we would finish out any F3 workout, and I'll let you begin. Or I'll begin. How about I begin? Christopher Wolfe,
I might have
41.
Missed. I might have. I think I missed the first. I missed the first half. What you said.
Oh, so I was saying let's have a meteorological aviation conversation for another time, because I can be respectful of your time. And let's finish it out like we'd finish out any other F3 workout.
Yeah, no problem. Sounds good.
You can go first.
All right. So is this like asking for prayers? Is that what we're doing?
No. Name, age. No. Name, age.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
You better edit this part of the video. I'll tell you that much, because this is
it'll
really
be
screwed
edited.
This last part up.
Yeah, it'll be edited.
All right. Here we go. Bryan Johnson, 42, Doppler.
Christopher Wolfe, 41, cataracts.
Thanks,
Doppler, for doing this. I appreciate you, brother. I'll see you in the gloom.
All right, man. I appreciate you. Thanks so much.